Hey, welcome in to another episode of the Her Hoop Stats podcast. We've got a little mini reunion here. Chelsea Late was saying in the Slack she's feeling a little bit of FOMO, but we'll all get our opportunities back together. We'll get the gang back together again. But for today, folks, I am, as always, Jamie Steyer Johnson, and I am joined by Tyler DeLuca, fresh off of yet another little globe trotting trip.
Literally fresh off. Literally just walked through the door.
Walked through the doors, got the setup back together. Yeah. Do not doubt the commitment. We certainly appreciate it. So Tyler was boots on the ground in Dallas over the weekend and then into Monday. So got to see both the season opener of Dallas and Minnesota, and then also Dallas and Seattle. So a couple of interesting games for a variety of reasons. Yeah. So we're going to delve into all of that, kind of the environment, talk about all three of the teams he saw. Specifically want to mention, I'll say it here, I'll remind y'all at the end as well, but today, Wednesday, that this drops, Justin Carter's going to have a really good Wings piece going up on the website as well. And so as we're talking about this, if you're thinking, man, I need a little bit more on the Wings, because honestly, at this point, I feel like we all need a little bit more perspective on the Wings. So Justin's going to have some really great words on that I was just sneaking a little bit of a peek at, so make sure you check that out. But for today here on the pod, Tyler, right off the bat, tell us a little bit. We were talking before we started recording just about the vibe. You obviously had been to games last year, and you said it's a very, very different roster, very different feeling since Paige got in, and just with so much change, so much turnover in Dallas. So what was kind of the game day experience? What was sort of the fan situation, things like that, that you were able to see here opening weekend?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, so I've been covering games in Dallas, like just traveling down when I can for 4 years, something like that, give or take. And I mean, you could tell the energy was different. Dallas has actually always had, like, I feel like the fans that have showed up for Dallas have always actually been, like, really good. Like, they're loud in there, like they are engaged, like they stay in their seats through timeouts, like little things that you kind of, like, in my head, like if I see people still sitting in their seats, during halftime or whatever, like everyone's just very engaged, right? And so you just kind of multiply that with obviously the arrival of Paige Beckers, right? And so it was again, I think a multiplication of what was good about the Dallas franchise is kind of what I saw from an energy perspective and like the game day experience and things of that nature. I'll tell you that, especially that first game, the season opener, Greg Bibb and Kurt Miller were on the floor like the politicians of Dallas, like handshakes and everything. And like, to me, it's
doing everything short of kissing babies and maybe a little bit of that.
Like, to me, like what it gave was great pride in what the direction of the Wings was. Like, that is what, to me, I mean, look, if things are going wrong for anyone, you're not showing face, generally speaking, So like if you're not confident in what's about to happen, you're not showing face. And to me, like, that was a big deal. And I'm not saying that, like, I can't recall a time where I've seen like Greg Bibb in previous years, like really like on the court the way he was pregame. I'm not saying that it hasn't happened either. But to me, that was what really stuck out. And like the media presence, like the eyes were there. Like, I mean, I've never seen the media room that full at a Wings game. Like, and you can take that as you will, good or bad. But yeah, I think just generally like the idea of adding on to what was already good about the Dallas like fan base in that way, and the coverage and things of that nature. Again, it felt like they took the things that were already good and kept them. And now really, not that it's as much as like a different game day experience as much as a larger game day experience, purely just because you got more people in the building, which is a great thing. That's a great thing. So again, nothing like incredibly different, but you could definitely tell like the energy. I feel like the diehard Dallas fans that had been there, like it carried over into maybe new faces or maybe just faces that are all in the same place at the same time at one game. So it was a really fun time for both games.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of been the trajectory of the W as a whole, right? Is things are being amplified, and it can be sort of into the stratosphere right off the top. Sometimes it's going to be a little bit more of a slow build, but regardless, especially in a place like Dallas that, as you say, I mean, they really love their basketball. They've had really great players that just hasn't completely come together in the way that they've wanted it quite yet. But especially when you have like this new group in leadership and then you get a number 1 draft pick. I mean, that's a lot to be excited about. And there's a lot of reason to, I think, want to be there kind of on the ground floor so that even if things aren't flawless immediately, because who wouldn't expect that? Right. There's people that do see the vision and do want to see where they're going. But to that point, as you said, not quite, I think, the most flawless start, which super understandable. A lot of turnover, even beyond inserting a rookie into your starting lineup in Paige Beckers. But also, I mean, just a handful of returning players from last year, just a very different style, new coaching staff, all that fun stuff. So tell us a little bit about how you felt about how the Wings performed against a couple of very different opponents in the Lynx and the Storm, and what you saw maybe from game 1 to game 2.
I mean, look, to start off with Paige, right? Obviously the new face in the place. I thought she was incredibly solid throughout both games. Like, I thought game 2, especially against Seattle, I thought she was really, really good. But to me, Paige is not a high risk player. Like, that's never been what she is. Like, she is going to get to her spots. She's not going to put a ton of shot up. Like that's not who she is. And I think that works really well into limiting your early mistakes in, like, as you're kind of transitioning into the W. So, like, to me, I think the biggest thing for Paige is she used a ton of screens in college, and had really good screen setters at UConn. And I think finding new ways to make space, whether it's multiple bodies being thrown at her now, or just frankly better defenders, right? I mean, like, we just saw her go against Skylar and Gabby Williams. And like, I don't know if anyone has a better perimeter defense than what Seattle has, like, just from a pure, like, individual talent perspective in that way. But again, I thought that she was incredibly stable throughout, which was super important. Look, man, past that, a little bit up and down is how I would describe it. I think Maddie Siegrist was a very big high in both games. I would love to see her in the starting lineup. Personally, I think her at that 4, and have Melissa Smith coming off the bench is, I mean, we saw that lineup, especially it was the second quarter of the Minnesota game where Siegrist came in, and it was the 4 other starters and Maddie in there instead of Melissa, and I thought that those were great minutes. In that second game against Seattle, the whole bench pretty much that was especially in that second half when they really kind of made the run. It was Ty Harris, who I love Ty Harris's game already. Her next to Paige, I love it. I really do. I absolutely
kind of a sneaky highlight.
Yes. So I was on a little bit, I think, of a minutes restriction in that first game, but got to play more in the second game. I love what I saw. Tiara McCowan was much better in that second game after getting quick foul trouble in that first game. I think the obvious question going forward is your starters and how do they fit together? Because we saw DeJounte Carrington struggled in that second game. We saw Arike Ogunbowale struggle in that second game. And Hines Allen didn't have the best second game either. That's where I'm at. And frankly, like, those might not be questions you can answer in this season. And obviously there's going to be a ton of roster turnover to come. So I don't know if that's a this season question to ask, frankly. But I do think you need to figure out what Paige Beckers, to a point, is going to be in the WNBA, in the sense of, do you want her to be your point guard and be a heavy facilitator? Do you want her, you can still have her be the point guard, but, like, do you want her to, like, how do you find the balance? And that's always kind of been the question with Paige, right? Is, like, how do you find the balance of, like, we want you to put up a ton of shots because you're this incredible shot maker, but also, like, we know how good of a facilitator you are and how well you can run a system, and finding that balance. That's really what I think the main question to answer is, because I don't know what this roster is going to look like next year. I don't know what any roster is going to look like next year. It's going to be
and that's what we keep talking about with the situation of next season, where already you have this tremendous influx of young talent, and so you would already want to build around them if you could. But given the fact that the only people you can guarantee will be back on your roster are the ones that are young, that are still locked in for several years, that's where you do get to the point where, as you were saying, some of these questions of how the pieces fit together might not be answered this year. And so if they're not likely going to be answered, you don't really need to waste time trying to figure it out in the short term. If there's more questions you could maybe answer in the long term, in a different approach. And I'm not necessarily saying that it is all one or the other, but I do think that you are going to see potentially a lot more flexibility, a lot of different looks. And I mean, even as you say, the starting lineup, like I think that it would be a good opportunity to kind of tailor that to who your opponent is, because that's going to be extremely variable. And I mean, Maisha Hens-Allen has a great motor. She's going to work really hard. She's also going to make some pretty wild mistakes, sometimes try to do too much. And so there's a lot of upside. There's a good bit of downside as well. You have Teaira McCowan, who could be so dominant, but who can kind of take herself out of games at times. And I mean, in game one, Minnesota is one of the worst matchups in the league for Teaira McCowan. So that, like, in itself wasn't totally unprecedented. But then to see her get a little bit more involved in game two certainly was more encouraging. And so maybe we see some games where she's in the starting lineup. Maybe we see the games where Maisha's in the starting lineup. I agree. I think that there's absolutely a lot to be said for putting Maddie Siegrist in there in the starting lineup. And that also could be matchup dependent. That could be a more permanent move as well, because I just think that she has that kind of calming, steady presence where you generally know what you're going to get from her. And that's really not the case for most of that roster. And so it's really important to have like some known quantities. But yeah, there's a good bit of uncertainty. And so I do think that a lot of the focus has to be on what can we figure out going forward. Well, I think it's how much can we figure out in the extreme short term. And then once you get past like the opening couple weeks and you kind of get to, all right, I guess this is sort of what we are this year. Then you say, okay, let's try to maximize what we've got. But then you sort of shift your focus on, we've maximized, we kind of have what our goal is in mind. We kind of figured out where we land in this hierarchy in the league. Now we have to also make sure we're being put in a good position going forward.
I completely agree. And I think to that point, when it comes to like these immediate next couple of weeks, I'd say the quote from Chris Koklanis, the Dallas Wings head coach, that just absolutely has stuck with me since it was after the Seattle game. And obviously, Arike did not have a good game, like just bluntly. Like the shot selection I didn't love. Obviously, the percentage wasn't great. I think it was 2 for 14, if I'm not mistaken, that she ends up with, like single digit scoring. The thing that he said was when asked about Arike's performance is how do we get Arike to, how does she impact the game when she's not scoring? And I think that's always relatively been an Arike question, right? Is like, we know when she's on, I don't know, like there's an argument that she's the best scorer in the entire league whenever she's on, right? And I think that that's going to be a very big thing going forward, because I just, there's a very different feel to this team depending on if Arike is off the court or on the court, and just how they're operating on offense. And naturally, because of how insane of an offensive player Arike is, right? But when it's hard to allow her to kind of shoot through the slump, if you will, like during a game, if she's not impacting other parts of the game. And that's why we saw, I think she went out with like 2 minutes left in the third quarter and didn't come in until 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. And that's when a large part of the run for the Wings came, when they get it down to, I believe, as low as 3 against Seattle. And so that's what's going to be very interesting to me in the immediate short term, because I think that is one question you absolutely have to figure out this year is, do you think Paige and Arike is like your duo going forward? Like obviously there's a chance of being a lottery team and you might be able to add another very good young player next to Paige, but ultimately Arike is a free agent at the end of this year. You need to decide this year, is that something you want long term? Is Paige and Arike as your 1 and your 2 for this team? And so that's, to me, the immediate question that you have to answer, again, both for the future and if you're trying to win games now, which they obviously, like they certainly are, you have to try and get that figured out.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting too, because like as we talk a little bit about the short term, like I do think that level of familiarity will certainly improve.
Sure.
I think back to like one play that really stuck out to me from the game against Seattle. There was like, it was, I think, about 3 minutes into the second quarter. Arike had been out and she had just come back into the game, and she comes down from the block up around a screen at the top of the key, and she was like wide open for a second, like enough time to get her the ball and
Mhm.
shoot. And the pass from Paige on the wing was just a little bit off from where she wanted it. It
Mhm.
was a little bit wide. And
Mhm.
so she got it. She had to gather, take a dribble. And by that point, Gabby Williams was kind of right up in her face.
Right.
And so she ended up missing the shot. And so I think that just as you increase that level of familiarity, Paige
Mhm.
is someone who obviously has the skills, has the awareness to know that one of the most important things you can do as a point guard is not just get people the ball, but get people the ball where they want it.
For sure.
And so, she'll realize, okay, this is the angle Arike is going to take coming off a screen. This is where she's going to want the ball. And she
Mhm.
can get that ball right into the pocket and maybe buy that extra half second of time to get a wide open look. And then it's a completely different sort of situation. It's a completely different ball game. But this is where how short of a turnaround we have between, trading camp or the draft to training camp
Mhm.
to the regular season really shows. And so I'm excited to see that continue to develop. I think that with the way that you talk about the perimeter defense from Seattle, and you're very right, but also the way that they gambled and
Mm.
doubled and were so aggressive opened a lot of shots up that just didn't fall either. So I
Mhm.
think that there's kind of those two sides of the coin where
Yeah.
we'll talk about Seattle in a second, but for Dallas, like, okay, at some point you have to start making the open looks. And
Yeah.
I do think that they will as they settle in, but
Mhm.
that's certainly something that I think is kind of interesting. And then I don't know, just I think just the cohesion
Yeah,
because
and
I this
I'm not pulling fire alarms yet by any means
right.
because it is obviously it's just game 2, right?
Yeah.
I absolutely think you're right where it's like I think once we're about a month into the season, we kind of know what we're
We see
working with.
what's changed by
Yeah,
then.
we kind of know
Yes.
what we're working with. Like normally, like you're not gonna like get insanely better or worse after All Star break. Like
Mhm.
so, like especially by All Star break, well, we should know what everyone's working with, right? And so again, I'm not pulling fire alarms. I'm not or anything like that. But like if your head coach is saying it in the press conference,
Yeah.
like and this is a conversation that is not the first time we've had it like it becomes a tendency and
Yeah.
that's what I think worries me more than anything else. Yeah, I think that if nothing else this season, that is the question that the Wings have to answer going forward because there's gonna be a lot of investment put into Arike if you do keep her around, which
Yeah.
might work out and it might be the move, but it just naturally is going to be a lot of investment. So
This is
I'm
the
very
make or
interested
break
in it.
time to
For
to
sure,
decide where
for
you're
sure.
going
Absolutely.
forward. Yeah. And I mean the other just minor like cohesion thing
Mhm,
that I'm curious about too on the defensive end is
mhm.
we know how Dejanay Carrington is as a defender, and there were several times, especially again against Seattle, where she's turning around looking at her teammates like making the
Yes.
hand motion, urging them to get up.
Yeah.
And so I'm interested to see how that develops because I don't know if it's a disconnect between the players on the floor
Mm,
or implementation of the preferred system because we
mm.
know that Koklanis is a very defensive minded coach. And so maybe she's the one that like it's really clicking for. And so she's
Yeah,
trying to kind of encourage everyone else to get involved. So I think that that's the other really big thing we're going to see from
for sure.
Dallas is do they get frankly on the same page
Mhm, mhm.
consistently?
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. Again, there was a lot of miscommunication, I felt like, on just both sides of the ball.
And that's so
Just
normal in the
yeah,
beginning, but like
for sure.
again, this is
New coach, new roster.
for
It
what they have,
right.
the potential they have. It's like this is what has to be
Yeah. I
done
mean,
quickly.
it doesn't like it can both be like understandable, but can also be true that there are
Right.
problems, you know? So
100%.
so
Like we're
that's
not
where I'm
expecting perfection, but
yeah,
this is what wasn't perfect and
yeah,
that can certainly be better.
yeah, absolutely. No, I'm with you on that. I'm very interested in seeing again, I think there's just generally room for improvement pretty much across the board. So I'm very interested in what those strides look like and who is the one because I also just think in general, like to kind of wrap up on the Wings, like there's just a lot of room for opportunity for kind
Yeah.
of anyone to like we saw JJ Quinterly get in that game last night. Like we like just up and down the roster, it could really be anyone. And I think that's
Like we know they're gonna implement Geisel Soder now that she like
yeah,
has a little bit of time to get into
yeah.
practice and stuff like that. Like we know that they very much want to use her
Hmm.
and see how she looks out there, especially with the fact that they don't have like a consistent big that they feel
Hmm.
really confident going to. So it's like, hey, what can you give us?
Right. And so I'm just generally very excited to see what that part looks like as well and who is the one to step up. And again, because if you do it now, you might find yourself on like you might find your role on this team for like the next 4 or 5 years. Like honestly, like just with like that is kind of what is on the line here. Is genuinely this is a brand new regime, top to bottom roster, a new era with Paige. Like it is a relatively blank slate. And anyone can kind of work their way into being a very important piece of this Dallas franchise for a long time. So I'm very interested in seeing who kind of takes that opportunity and runs with it.
Yeah, that's there's certainly, like you said, a whole bunch of potential there.
Mm.
So moving on here, let's hit on the two other teams that you saw there.
Yeah.
I think that we'll keep Minnesota for the end because I think there's a little bit less to discuss about them at this moment.
I agree. Yeah.
In comparison to the other team, which is the Seattle Storm, because we saw some pretty varied performances from the Storm to start the year. Is I think the way I'll phrase that,
That's
right?
a great way of phrasing it.
And so I'm curious to hear your take, especially we know you've had a whole lot of thoughts on the Storm this year. You had a lot of excitement for some of their draft potential, some unfortunate cuts, some not a whole lot of opportunity yet, which again, early, still implementing people. They've got vets, all of that. But what's the thoughts? What'd you see, especially live from the Storm?
Well, I saw two different teams versus the first half to the second half. I mean, just putting it kind of bluntly.
Yep.
Like you go 9 for 11 from 3, which you're not gonna go every night, right? But that's what you shoot that in the first half, and then you don't make a 3 in the second half, and you only attempt, I think it was like 4 more. So it's like what is the strategy? Like that's where like I don't know what their offensive identity is. You have your incredible star power, which won you that game. And look, they were incredible. Skylar was phenomenal. Nneka was incredible. Gabby Williams, again, I said if she can get to that 15-plus point mark on any given night, you're feeling good. She gets to 17. Like that's what you're aiming for. But you have that's who all scored. There was like 10 other points scored from anyone else. Dominique Malonga having 1 minute with me there in person, I was sick to my stomach. I wanted to see Malonga play so bad. And she gets a singular minute. Un minute. Like I was so sad.
That one hurt a little bit, especially because like when I was watching the replay, you could see when they put her in at the end of that second quarter, and I don't know exactly like what their specific scheme was, but it seemed pretty obvious based on the bench's reaction that she did not cover the pick and jump shot on Paige the way they wanted. And so they let the time run out. She goes down, she finishes a shot around the rim and doesn't go back in. And it's just like, especially in a game where, yes, it got tight.
But it's the Dallas
Wings,
and y'all were
gotta
up
have
like
some opportunity.
16.
It got tight, but like there was plenty of opportunity to toss her out there and to give her another chance. And if she goes out and she immediately botches your defensive scheme again, you say, all right, man, this ain't your night. We'll hit the books, like we'll go over it. But man, that was a short leash for a game where they had a double-digit lead for a significant portion.
Yeah, no, I was very shocked by that, frankly. And then even if you kind of like Ezzy is gonna have to be a more consistent scorer as well, like just generally speaking. Again, like it was so weird because you see these stars being so good, right? I'm actively seeing Nneka take over this game. Skylar just have her fingerprints on everything across it on the offense and defensive side of the ball. Gabby the same. Yet I'm still like the score just keeps getting closer, and like that was a very like weird thing to witness where I'm like, these stars are playing really good. But again, in that second half, the offense just kind of sputtered in comparison to like the second quarter. And again, a lot of that has to do with the 3-point shooting, which I was surprised when you're that hot. Again, you're not going to rely on shooting. I think it was like 81.6% is what they shot in the first half. You're never going to rely or bank on the fact you're going to shoot 81%. That's not stable. But to not shoot, like if you're shooting 9 for 11 and you don't get up to like 20 attempts in the game, like that feels kind of crazy because obviously something was working.
Well, and I don't feel like that was Dallas completely selling out and saying we're not allowing any threes.
Not,
like they definitely focused on it a little bit more in the second half, but not to the point where it was an impossibility.
Right. And again, we just talked about Dallas was not stable. like with their defense rotations and things like that. And so like I think Dallas was better in the second half for sure. But and then you add the Mercury game into the mix. Like if you're looking like in totality of their first 2 games, the offense just does not look good. And I look, a lot of those shots were going to Jewel Lloyd when stuff wasn't working.
Mhm.
And that is the obvious big difference in this roster from last year to this year. And again, we still see the stats being put up by the Stars, but like only getting I was no more than 10 points. I forget the exact number, but from everyone else outside of the three that I named, like that just isn't gonna cut it, right? Like your Stars were playing championship level, your team was not. And
Mhm.
that is what's gonna be very interesting to me going forward is I mean, just frankly, how do you get others involved? Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be anything crazy, but if you can get even just 15 points, like in total from your bench, right? And if you get all four of you add Ezzy into that mix and you get all four of them in double figures, right? Like it feels like just kind of like when you say it out loud, it might not feel like the biggest mark to reach, but it's very important because you almost lost to
It's the
Dallas.
little things. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
the little things that make the difference. Because yeah, I mean, to bring in like the exact numbers coming off the bench, you had 3 points from Erica Wheeler, 2 points from Dominique Malonga in her
Mhm.
minute 21 seconds, and that's it off the bench. And then you had 6 points from Alicia Clark, 7 from Ezzy Magbagor. So
Mhm.
everyone outside of the big three combined for 18 points,
That's just not
and
gonna
Gabby
cut it.
Williams herself had 17.
Right, right, and that was like that's just again like you're going to be able to win games off of the strength of your stars when they're playing like the way that they were playing last night, and like that is the great thing about having stars on your team is that they can go and win you games. To win a championship, you got to be a championship caliber team, and I did not see that last night. And again,
Mhm.
obviously, we say all this with it being very early, but from what I saw last night and what the expectations of the Storm and like their ceiling is, I saw way closer to the floor than I did to the ceiling
Mhm.
in that game in person.
And that's generally what you I think hope for in the beginning of the season
Yeah.
at the very least where you have opportunity to improve
Hmm.
and especially to see that in a win you say
Right.
okay great now back to the drawing board and obviously we're seeing a lot of figuring out
Hmm.
rotations and figuring out minutes and when you have injuries that happen in training camp that shakes things up even more and then you have Belonga obviously a late report and so there's so many mitigating factors but it's
Hmm.
like we've seen what they can do
Hmm.
individually and already we've seen little flashes of it. And so it's just, I hope as a basketball fan that they figure it out sooner rather
Yeah.
than later because the pieces are so fun. And especially knowing the situation with free agency, it's like for what they have together right now, you just really want to see what they're capable of with this group because you have to feel like this is almost certainly not going to be a team that runs it back as a
Yeah. It's
unit
certainly a
anywhere,
very real
but
possibility. Yeah.
especially there. So I just want to see, okay, what roles can these players step into because it could be so fun. It has been already some really really fun moments.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Again, I need more Malonga. Like honestly, like both selfishly and like I think this team, like her not getting 10, like she got 10 minutes in that Phoenix game, and I was already like, damn, I want some more Malonga. Like
Mhm.
and that might have been selfish. You got to get at least 10 minutes a game. I feel like you can find that in this game,
Especially when
especially
you're barely playing your bench.
right. And also like you're always gonna have her next to an all star. She's gonna be next to Ezzy or NECA at all times. So like even if there are mistakes being made, which they're going to be,
Mhm.
you got some of the best backup in the league that you could possibly have for
Well,
them.
and if you really start figuring some stuff out, and there's some games where like it just ain't working,
Mhm,
and like that's going to essentially remove your win condition.
mhm.
Okay, there's
For
some
sure,
games maybe where she
absolutely.
doesn't get run, but there's no reason why in a game like that she doesn't get more than one opportunity
Yeah,
at the very
I completely
least.
agree. Yeah, I was sick to my stomach. I was so sad.
I know. I saw you too. I was like, Tyler, his heart is all the way broken
Mhm,
right now.
mhm.
All right. Well, let's wrap up here really quick with hitting on the Minnesota Lynx because, frankly, as much as I could talk about them for like hours,
Yeah.
I feel like there's not a whole lot to add because
Mhm.
what we hoped and expected from preseason has to this point pretty well materialized, and
Yeah.
that's without Kayla McBride yet. So, and with an Alana Smith that's been a little bit hobbled. And so I certainly personally have been really impressed, really excited.
Mhm.
I think we've seen again, it hasn't been fully consistent. We've seen kind of highs and lows. We saw a game one where both Courtney Williams and Afisa Collier couldn't miss a shot.
Goodness.
If they were turned around at half court shooting behind their head, like
Literally.
it was anything was going down. Court struggled a little bit shooting in the second game, but still figured out a way to get things done. I feel like the distribution has been really good. I feel like the defense has continued to be really solid, which we saw last year. Just a really good team unit.
Yeah.
And so for you getting to see them in person, you were kind of saying before we recorded, like as advertised, fun group to watch.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, that third quarter of Courtney Williams and Afisa Collier against Dallas. This is my first. I think I've seen Fee in person before, but not since like the ascendancy of Fee. Watching her operate in person, I felt like I was like on cloud nine. Like that was incredible basketball. And Courtney
and to have
right
it her both her and Courtney at the same time,
oh
like.
Goodness.
Because, I mean, it's just impossible to guard all of the options you have, even just between the two of them, let alone the other three players on the court. And the way they work together with the amount of time they've played together now under their belt, it's just like, it's such beautiful basketball.
It really was. Yeah. And I think the other thing, again, just kind of to keep it short, I going into the season, I was like, okay, we're talking about margins here. You got us pretty much as close as you could possibly get to winning the championship without winning it. Where are your margins? And to me, I was looking at if you can either get Courtney Williams to up to 15 points a game, like that is like when I think of like a number 3, like that is where like I'm kind of at. It was like 15. She was at around like 11, 12 last season. So that so far so good. and the other thing was the bench was like, okay, who's going to be like your breakout kind of bench player? Diamond Miller in that game against Dallas was phenomenal. I loved watching her in that game. Didn't have as much of an explosive game in game 2, but that first game against Dallas, watching her in person, and she left some stuff on the board, honestly, like a couple of missed shots, and was still really, really good in that game where I was like, hold on. And we had heard Cheryl Reeve kind of talking about her in the preseason of like, we're kind of banking on Diamond a little bit. And then so you have her, and then you also have Shepherd, who has also been very, very good.
Getting her back and like the way that she just kind of slid right in, like she didn't miss any, like absolutely no misstep, no missed time. And that's with like a pretty different roster from the last time she was there too. I feel like has been so impressive. First of all, to see, okay, yeah, she's healthy now because she was not the last year that she was in Minnesota. And man, has she really developed and just so underrated. Her passing, like her passing has been absurd to start the year. And when you just throw another player where you say passing, like how strong their passing is onto a roster that already is packed full of incredible passers, like that's hoops.
Very real hoops.
It
was incredibly real hoops. So I think again to kind of keep it short on them, like to me, it what we know is still true. And the margins seem to be getting slimmer is how I'll deem it. It's like the things like where it's like I don't imagine them getting much better than they were last year. But if you look at where they could potentially improve, the early signs are that those improvements have been made. And like we're seeing like the growth from different players, or again, just Shepherd coming back, like whatever it may be, like those margins I feel like are continuing to get thinner. And again, this is before you even insert Kelly McBride back into this, who I don't imagine is going to hurt any of this by any means. Like I think it's only going to get better from there. They're already still really, really good. So again, to me, I kind of had the idea in my head of like going into that first game, like, okay, here are the things where it's like, if I'm nitpicking, here's where I'm at with Minnesota. And I feel like I pretty much saw all those things look better than they did last season. So leaving incredibly impressed with getting to see Minnesota in person.
Yeah, it was certainly a good one to see there at the very least. They acquitted themselves well in your presence, so
they did.
A fortunate there for at least my personal agenda.
Yeah, absolutely
to be pushed on to the rest of our Career Stats podcast group. So well, thanks for joining me today, fresh off the road, Tyler. Certainly appreciate it. Where can everyone find you? Find your work? Where would you like to be found here in the week or so till we got you coming back on next week?
Yeah, at Tyler DeLuca on everything. Most of my work, just generally speaking, is nocatspacewbb.com, all that. Of course, here on the Her Hoop Stats Network as well every week. So of course, everyone's gonna we have our daily podcast and everything. So make sure you're tapped in across the board. And yeah, I'd be on Twitter, you know, for better or for worse. For better or for worse, I'd be on Twitter. So at Tyler DeLuca is where you can find me.
All right. Well, you can find Tyler DeLuca, as he said, at Tyler DeLuca. Don't forget, folks, make sure that you're checking out our website, Her Hoop Stats, especially based on today's discussion. Justin Carter hit a lot of similar points and kind of dove into some of the potential lineup things we talked about. Talked a little bit about the potential Beckers Wale combo, and so was able to sort of dive in on that. And so, if you need another opinion on that, you've got a really, really good one there in Justin. So make sure you're following along with all of our newsletters. Subscribe for that. And I am Jamie Steyer Johnson. You can find me on any social media platform at pretty much at JSteyz, JSTEYZ. Tomorrow on the Her Hoop Stats podcast, we'll have Chelsea Late and Richard Cohen, and then I will be back on Friday. In the meantime, Jamie, Tyler, we are out. Thanks so much for tuning in.